Welcome back to the KAHI Afternoon News. Good afternoon. I am Casey Freelove. Pleased to be joined by Congressman Tom McClintock for our weekly conversation. And Tom, I really have a lot of different sheets and a lot of different notes, different things to talk about. I want to start with your personal experience being with the president down near the border on Friday. I've read a little bit about online, but I mean, you were there in person. You got a chance to be with President Trump and a lot of people who, in my opinion, understand the actual illegal immigration issue that's going on here. Just tell me a little bit about how the event went for you.
Well, it was amazing. First of all, I have to tell you, Air Force One is way better than United Airlines. We landed at Naval Air Station El Centro and then motorcaded down to Calexico. It's about a 15-mile drive. This is an area that's 70% Democrat. It's desert area. I mean, you've got to drive miles to get to the motorcade route, and there's just nothing there but desert and agricultural fields. And for 15 miles, there were thousands and thousands of people with American flags, Trump signs, thumbs up everywhere we went. Not a single protester did we see. So something's going on out there. Certainly the people down there by the border understand the crisis thoroughly and are entirely behind the president. I can tell you in the hour that we visited on Air Force One, I left with the impression that this is his number one priority, is to secure the borders. He feels until we do that, nothing else matters, and he is making enormous progress. Present with us was the commanding general of the Army Corps of Engineers, who's tasked with the responsibility to complete the wall as quickly as possible. They have already completed about 100 miles of wall. You'll see people say, oh, well, that really doesn't count because that's replacement wall. Well, what they're doing is they're replacing what amounts to a backyard fence with a 30-foot high impenetrable barrier. And that's what they've accomplished so far. The president just yesterday, the day before yesterday, released money for another 57 miles of construction, and they're looking at having at least 400 miles of barrier up before the end of next year along the most critical parts of the border. And I can tell you, having seen it now firsthand and by helicopter, there are areas where you don't need a wall. The terrain is absolutely impenetrable. I had trouble realizing that until I actually saw it. But, I mean, there are large areas where you simply cannot cross. The wall's needed, obviously, for those areas where you can, and 400 miles will go a long way to securing our border, and that will be in place by next year.
Yeah, and a couple other questions. I was reading Rio Grande Valley Sector Chief Patrol Agent Rodolfo Carish was at a Senate Homeland Security Committee hearing earlier this week, and basically he said that this crisis, I mean, we've been focusing a lot on people coming from Mexico and Central America, but according to him, his sector alone has apprehended people from 50 different countries, including China, Bangladesh, Turkey, Egypt, and Romania. So the crisis even larger than maybe the media portrays or even the average American might think about.
Well, I'm having trouble wrapping my mind around is the fact that they had over 100,000 illegal immigrants intercepted at the southern border. 100,000 in a single month. They are on track to stop 1.2 million illegal aliens over the next year. And bear in mind, those are just the ones that they're catching. And unfortunately, because of the abuse of our asylum laws, they have to release most of them back into our country, even after they've been arrested for the crime of illegally entering our country.
Did he discuss at all the possibility that's been floated out there about completely shutting down the border, at least at this particular event that you were at?
First and foremost, he was very complimentary of the Mexican government, which after he made that threat, which would be absolutely, it would hurt our economy, it would absolutely devastate Mexico's. And once he issued that threat, Mexico has now started arresting and turning around illegal immigrants on their southern border, from the Central American countries in Guatemala and Honduras. they have been crossing unmolested across Mexico to reach our country. When the president issued that threat, suddenly the Mexicans got serious about stopping the illegal immigration on their southern border. So I don't think he feels the necessity to do so yet. He has made it very clear, however, that he may well be issuing tariffs against Mexico if it doesn't move aggressively to stop the illegal immigrants moving through their country into the United States. The big problem right now has simply been, with 100,000 illegal border crossers, that takes up all of the Border Patrol's attention, and they have very, very few resources then to keep the regular ports of entry open, and there have been reported 10-hour backups of cargo trucks at the legal border crossings. That's not because of anything the president has ordered. That's simply because the Border Patrol is completely overwhelmed.
And I'm just a little bit more curious about the geography, because you mentioned you were in a helicopter and you got to take a look at it. It's kind of hard for people that haven't been down there, and I myself have not been down to Texas, to kind of visualize just exactly how much, construction materials will be involved in this. After having looked at it, I mean, does it feel a little less overwhelming than just looking at numbers on paper where you're saying, okay, there's a physical border there where these people would not be able to get across, and we can certainly fill in these other areas with time, money, and effort?
Oh yeah, the portions of the wall that we inspected were awesome. There's no way anybody's getting through those. And they're going up very, very quickly. What they're replacing in many parts are not even just backyard fences. There were large portions of so-called fencing or wall that you could just walk right through. They were actually vehicle obstacles, but you could walk right through them. You just couldn't drive a vehicle through them. And so, I mean, completely porous. All of those are being replaced with 30-foot high steel barricades with concertina wire on top. Nobody's getting through those.
We're visiting with Congressman Tom McClintock here on KAHI. Tom, I was able to catch your interview on Fox Business yesterday, and it kind of goes along the lines of what we were talking about. The article that I read was talking about the Trump administration aggressively pushing for tougher screening of asylum seekers, which is part of the immigration crisis. He even shook up some of his top immigration officials. You talked a little bit about, kind of where does this end up? The lower courts try and tie things up, and eventually it may end up in the Supreme Court. Could you just kind of explain to listeners what you mean by that? I think I get it. But
again, you've got activist left-wing judges in the lower courts that are doing everything. They're part of the so-called resistance and proud of it. But the moment they get the cases move up into the higher courts, and particularly the Supreme Court, they're being struck down. And that's really important, because what's going on at the southern border is a complete abuse of our asylum laws. And what they're doing is they're crowding out the ability of our country to accept legitimate refugees. Our asylum laws are not there to protect people from poverty and violence in their own countries. There are 7.5 billion people on this planet. Most of them live in countries plagued by violence and poverty. That doesn't give the right of everyone living in those countries to come to ours. Asylum is specifically reserved for those whose own government has singled them out for persecution because of their membership in a designated group, race, creed, political party. Those are the things that are protected by our asylum laws. Just wanting to come to a country with a much better economy, that is not grounds to seek asylum. And the false claims that are being made now by hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these so-called asylum seekers have nothing to do with asylum. And because of the way our laws are written, as long as they bring a child along with them, they've got to be, even making bogusly false claims, they have to be released into our country until there is a secondary hearing, to which they never show.
And let's just conclude on this, because clearly the president is sending a message by doing the shakeup with some of his top immigration officials. And I know you don't like to predict the future or anything, but if the president has said this is his top priority right now, I mean, should the American people, in your opinion, kind of feel like maybe a little bit more at ease? Like, look, despite the fact that there's a very vocal left wing that wants people to think that immigration is not an issue, the president is kind of prioritizing this at number one, and not only talking about it, but as we both know, actions speak a lot louder than words.
Well, there's reason for hope because we have a president who is absolutely riveted on this crisis, but we also have to bear in mind there is a large left-wing interest group to whom an open border is for them a desirable policy. They are depending upon importing millions of foreign nationals with no attachments to our country, impoverished, dependent, and susceptible to every empty promise that the socialists make. The left has alienated the people of our country, and now they're seeking to open our borders. And when they deny that, as they often do, oh, well, we're not for open borders. Well, ask yourself, look at all of the things they are lobbying for. Free services for illegal immigrants, everything from education and health care to free legal services and housing. They advocate for sanctuary laws that protect criminal illegal aliens from being deported as they're being released from prison. So instead they're being released into our own communities. You look at all of the things that the left has been lobbying for, it adds up to one thing and one thing only: open borders. And they're doing that because it fits their political agenda, and we all ought to recognize that and deal with it as such.
We've been visiting with Congressman Tom McClintock here on KAHI. Tom, as always, thank you so much for your time, and we'll look forward to visiting again soon.
My pleasure, Casey. Thanks again for having me.
We'll take a quick break and be right back on KAHI.